Hi everyone, so welcome back to my channel. In this video we'll be looking at the forensic psychology part, which will be in paper 3 of AQA A-level psychology. And I know a lot of people ask this about a lot of my other videos, but this should be everything that you need for the exams, because for these ones, because I don't have my revision notes on them, I've used the CGP revision textbook, so it covers everything that you need and is a bit more simple and yeah, it's a bit more sort of concise. So I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope to have the other paper 3 topics up by the paper 3 exam. Obviously this bit won't apply to those doing the exams next year or the year after, so this just talking to the people taking their exams now in 2019. But yeah, I hope you enjoy, hope you find it helpful, and obviously feel free to check out the rest of my channel for other videos to help with your exams. And again, like, subscribe, whoop, whoop, comment, obviously, and yeah, let's get into it. So firstly, looking at defining and measuring crime. So there are slight problems with defining crime. For example, it is time relative as laws change over time. So for example, rape within marriage was legal 100 years ago, but now it's not. It can be culturally relative, so laws vary per country and culture. And then age relative, so children under 10 cannot be charged with a crime. Although, so for example, if a child under 10 was to murder someone, they wouldn't technically be classed as murder, they wouldn't go through court and be sent to prison, but they would go through a lot of therapy to try and make sure they don't do this sort of behaviour in the future. So looking at measuring crime, so you've got official statistics, which are created by official bodies such as the criminal justice system, and has been used in England since 1805. However, there is the dark figure of crime. Obviously, this accounts for about 70% of crime, where basically it's not reported, it's not recorded, and it's just not in any statistics. And then Farrington and Dowds in 1985 found that Nottingham police recorded all crimes, including petty, but other counties didn't. So obviously there is some variation there and cannot be relied on fully. Offender surveys ask people to anonymously state what crimes they have committed in the last 12 months, measures both crimes that haven't been solved, are unknown to the police, and are victimless. And this is the Offending Crime and Justice Survey in the UK. People can lie or over-exaggerate, and people may not actually know that something is a crime. So, for example, this is quite something that I sort of found out about recently, is that if you're going through, like, for say, a McDonald's drive-through and you use your phone to pay, you are breaking the law because you're using your phone whilst you're driving, essentially. And I know that the only way you can use your phone in a car when you're driving is when the engine is turned off. So not only is that a useful bit of information for this exam, but also for all of you that are probably learning to drive at the moment, try to avoid paying your phone, especially if there's a policeman behind you. Victim surveys, data collected from people who have been a victim in the last 12 months, and this is known as the Crime Survey for England and Wales. This helps to provide a more accurate representation of the effects of crime. However, it relies on memories which could be biased, sorry there's a spelling mistake there, and it also does not include fraud or corporate crimes because these tend to not have immediate victims. So looking at offender profiling, you've got the American and the British. So the American is the top-down approach. So the FBI based this on interviewing 36 convicted serial killers and sex murderers. Organised offenders are intelligent, socially and sexually competent, lived with someone and plan their attacks, whereas disorganised offenders are less intelligent, socially and sexually incompetent, loners, and tended to act impulsively. However, this is based on self-report interviews, and also it is a small restricted sample because how do they know the organised or disorganised categories apply to people that steal? Does it apply to like company crimes, so like fraud? Douglas et al. In 1986 reports that the FBI used 4 main stages when building a profile. You've got assimilating data, collecting all information available, classifying the crime, reconstructing the crime, including offender and victim behaviour, and then creating a profile looking at physical and lifestyle characteristics. Then moving on to the British or bottom-up approach. This was devised by Cantor based on studying John Duffy, known as the railway rapist. It uses investigative psychology, applying psychological research and theories to criminal investigations, and also geographical profiling, suggesting the location of the crime scene would reveal information about the offender. So Cantor in 1994 identified 5 main characteristics that should be included in a profile. Personal characteristics, so this to do with sort of more height, age, that sort of thing. Criminal history, so whether they've actually completed the crime before. Residential locations, this is more the circle theory, so you're more likely to live closer to the scene of the crime. Domestic and social characteristics, and occupational and educational history. But a couple of negative points for both of these. So Douglas et al. 1986 suggests the process has been misinterpreted. And Copson in 1995 found 14% of police officers felt profiling helped solve a case, which obviously is not a very high percentage, seeing as it's something that's relied on a lot. And then looking at the biological explanations of offending behaviour. Sorry if this PowerPoint has got a lot of text on it. I've tried to sort of make sort of bold headings so you can sort of see where the information is. Firstly, looking at the historical approach with Lombroso. He believed in positivist criminology, in which there is no free will when committing a crime. So Lombroso went on to study the physical characteristics of Italian prisoners to see if there were any common features amongst prisoners that were less common in the general public, and found that the prisoners were actually more likely to have atavistic features such as a strong jaw, heavy brows, flat nose, and sloping shoulders, and suggest that the criminal behaviour came from primitive instincts related to the more primitive physical features that these prisoners are showing. And then certain combinations describe different types of criminals. So, for example, murderers had bloodshot eyes and curly hair. One strength of this is the fact that sort of criminal behaviour comes from an interaction between biological, psychological, and sociological factors. So this is sort of common to many modern theories. However, it did not use a non-criminal control group. And then looking at genetics, Mednick et al. 1984 did a concordance analysis of over 1,400 Danish adoptees, looking at criminality of the adoptees and their adopted and biological parents. So 13.5% of adoptees with no parental criminal behaviour committed crime, compared to 24.5% of those who both adopted and biological parents had criminal records. Suggests there is a genetic link, but concordance is low, so other factors may be involved. Studies show a link between genetics and aggression, though, as well. So Jacobs et al. 1965 found a higher percentage of people with an abnormal XYY chromosome in prison than the general public. And this abnormal chromosome can lead to increased testosterone and therefore more likely to have violent behaviour. And then looking at the neural behaviour. So Rain et al. In 1997 used PET scans to create 3D images of functional processes of 41 murderers and 41 control participants. The murderers showed higher dysfunctional brain processes, therefore showing a link between brain dysfunction and predisposition to violent crimes. Again, this provides support for biological factors, but no study has shown 100% concordance, so biology is not the only factor. And then generally, giving a limitation to all 3 of these explanations is that the whole biological explanation is thought to be too reductionist and deterministic. Like, obviously, it's not as simple as just, oh, someone's got an XYY chromosome, therefore this testosterone must be causing them to commit crime. Or, oh, that person has a strong jaw, they must be a prisoner, they must be a criminal, if that makes sense. Psychological explanations of offending behaviour. So looking firstly at Eysenck's theory of criminal personality. So this is neuroticism stability. So individuals towards the neurotic end of this dimension show traits such as anxiousness, but then on the other end of it, people show reliability and calmness. And then you're looking at the extroversion, introversion sort of scale. So extroverts are sociable, impulsive, and assertive, whilst introverts are quiet, passive, and reserved. In later research, he also added psychoticism, how disposed an individual is to a psychotic break, with those scoring highly being aggressive, hostile, and uncaring. And this obviously looks at the nature and nurture side of the debate. And those high on the psychotic scale were more likely to be criminal, as well as extroversion in young people and neuroticism in older people. However, this is based off self-report. Looking at the cognitive explanations, so Yolkerson and Samnow, I have no idea if I said that right, but in 1976 they conducted a longitudinal study of 255 male offenders. I will just make sure you read that, male offenders, male offenders. So if you know that study well, then if you're struggling to remember the evaluation in the exam, then you know, oh, but it was only male offenders, therefore there is a gender bias. Anyway, I'll carry on where I was before I got distracted. 50% were from a hospital providing secure treatment. So essentially, they were in a psychological hospital. I think that's sort of wording for it. While the other 50% were from a normal prison population. Only 30 participants finished study, but 52 thinking patterns were found. So, for example, criminal thinking patterns, such as the fear and the need for power, and automatic thinking errors, which is the lack of trust and empathy, and they are impulsive. Again, gender bias, but there is also not really any control group, so they're not actually comparing it to a normal population where there are no prisoners, there's no one committing a crime. And then lastly, looking at moral reasoning, this sort of slightly more heavy topic, I think, but Kohlberg suggests that our moral reasoning improves as we get older, as you take more of the social world into account. And this is sort of related to the Heinz dilemma, which I think is really important as to help explain this theory during your exam, because you can give the example of the Heinz dilemma. So Heinz had to steal from a drugstore to get the drugs to cure his dying wife, but obviously he's committed a crime to do this, so is it really worth it, I guess? So level 1 is pre-conventional reasoning. An action is morally wrong if you are punished for it and the right behaviour is in your best interest. Level 2, conventional reasoning. The right behaviour makes other people see you positively whilst obeying laws and following convention. And then level 3 is post-conventional reasoning. The right behaviour provides the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. Actions are driven by abstract principles which don't depend on the situation. Also, I hope you guys can actually read these slides okay. I know they're quite knowledge heavy or word heavy, but I just wanted to make sure everything was on one slide so you could actually see it all at once. So I think that'll make it less daunting, I hope. But a strength of this is that Allen et al. In 2001 found criminals have lower levels of moral reasoning, whereas again there is a gender bias because it only used a sample of boys. Right, even though I just said that I put it all on one slide, I completely forgot that I did a second slide. So this is still looking at the psychological explanations of offending behaviour. So first you've got cognitive distortion. So this is irrational thought patterns that create a distorted view of reality. And Gibbs et al. In 1995 suggested this as being self-centered, minimalisation. So obviously minimalisation is sort of not really seeing how the extent of your crime, sort of just making it really small. Blaming problems on others, and also hostile attribution bias, believing others are out to get them. And then looking at differential association theory by Sutherland in 1939, basically he came up with these 9 points to basically explain his theory, and that's all I've put on here for it. I mean, obviously there's a couple of evaluation points, but obviously because I just think these 9 points really explain very clearly and very well what he thought. So start off with criminal behaviour is learnt. Criminal behaviour comes from interacting and communicating with others. Criminal behaviour is most likely learnt whilst among small groups. Learning about criminal behaviour not only involves the techniques of committing the crime, but also the motivation and attitude. The law tells the criminal what is right and wrong. The criminal then decides whether the action is favourable or not. Repeated exposure to criminal behaviour is more likely to result in someone committing a crime themselves. Frequency, duration, priority, and intensity of interactions between criminals and the learners will impact the likelihood of them learning behaviour. The general theory of learning by association is also applicable to learning about crime. Anyone can become a criminal regardless of age, sex, and background. Obviously, A strength of this is that it does account for all people, but then again, it can also lead to issues. There are, of course, issues with defining crime. So obviously, whilst this theory is straightforward, obviously, what is actually the criminal behaviour, what criminal behaviour is actually taking place will vary. And then obviously the psychodynamic explanations. This is based on Freud's ideas, including an inadequate superego and defense mechanisms. So Blackburn in 1993 proposed 3 types of superego. The weak superego, often found in those without a same-sex parent. Deviant superego, found in those with an immoral same-sex parent. And a strong superego, often engaging in crime to get caught, as they feel guilt for acting the id's desires. And then Englander in 2007 describes how displaced aggression in offenders can lead to antisocial behaviour and result in violent behaviour. Although obviously this is hard to scientifically test, as it looks at the unconscious processes to crime, and obviously it is hard to generalise because I think a lot of the research focused on males, especially I know Freud's ideas did originally, which these are based off. And then dealing with offending behaviour. So the aims of custodial sentencing is retribution, essentially punishment, rehabilitation, incapacitation, so protecting the public, denunciation, showing the public that the action was wrong, and then deterrence, stopping future crime. However, it's thought there are a lot of psychological effects of custodial sentencing. So Dooley in 1990 looked at the case notes for 295 suicides that took place in prisons between 1972 and 1987. Those serving life sentences or convicted of violent or sexual crimes were most likely to suffer from poor mental health, and Dooley suggested that better communication is needed between prisoners and staff. It's sort of similar to Zimbardo's study, because obviously we saw a lot of psychological effects take place on the prisoners in that. And then institutionalization, where the prison strips prisoners of their autonomy and quickly conform. Prisons can reinforce criminal behaviour as inmates teach and learn from each other, and there can also be labelling after leaving prison, which can impact their ability to gain a job or maintain a social network. The strength of custodial sentencing is that it does successfully fulfil many of its aims, but it is mainly designed to please the public rather than actually reforming prisoners. And then looking at recidivism, so this is repeating an undesirable behaviour even after being punished for it. Influence for this include length of time in prison, supervision after conditional release, disciplinary reports, I've written that twice there, education level, seriousness of crime committed, ethnicity, and individual experiences in prison. Gillis et al. In 1998 found that offenders who found employment within 6 months of release were less likely to reoffend than those who did not find employment in this period. And then looking at some other ways of dealing with offending behaviour, you've got the token economy programme, which focuses on behaviour modification through operant conditioning by rewarding those who meet their behavioural goals with tokens. So the behaviour that is desired must be clearly defined. The variety of rewards must be given to encourage participation. The reasons for token allocation must be clear. What a token is worth must be clearly established, and the rate of earning tokens must also be established. A strength is that Millen and McKee in 1976 found performance for monitor behaviours best when the full token economy was in place, but Kierkegaard et al. In 1982 found truancy rates returned to normal when the programme was stopped. And then there's also anger management. So if this is a therapeutic programme designed to control anger in the hopes that they will be less likely to commit crime as a result of aggressive behaviour. And this tends to be made up of 2-hour sessions each week for 8 weeks, and encouraged to monitor behaviour outside of the sessions to become more aware of their emotional changes and also what triggers it. But obviously it's not suitable for everyone. However, Ireland in 2000 found an improvement in 92% of participants, but 8% were worse after the treatment. And then lastly, looking at restorative justice, criminals make amends with the victims and take responsibility for their actions. It can be used for various offences. The victim must volunteer and the offender must have admitted responsibility. May involve the victim and offender meeting face-to-face or communicating by letter. Offenders may also undo the damage they caused, such as removing graffiti. The Smith report in 2007 found it reduced PTSD in victims. However, there is a lack of awareness by the public about this. So that is the end of this video. Super quick, like 20 minutes long. I hope it covers everything you need, but obviously feel free to ask questions down below and I'll try and get back to you quickly, or my email will be in the description. And I'll also try to remember to put the PowerPoint, a link to the PowerPoint in the description as well, so you can access that. And then obviously if you do have any issues with accessing it, then feel free to email me about that as well and I'll try and get it sorted. So yeah, I hope you guys found that helpful, and good luck with your paper 3 exams, whether it's 2019, 2020, 2021, however long they keep doing these exams for. So good luck to you all, and you're all going to ace it, and I should hopefully have schizophrenia and issues and debates up soon as well. Thank you.